as you mature, I think gradually you become a little bit more selfless and want to give more to the world. And for me, I think art is very much about expressing beauty. So it's when I'm painting, or I'm not thinking so much about myself. I'm thinking I want to express the beauty that I experience or that I see, and I want to give that as a gift to others.
Milène, it's so lovely to meet you here on Zoom.
Lovely to meet you too. Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure. It's so lovely I would love to hear your story. But first I want to know, do I pronounce your name right?
Milène.
Milène.
Yeah.
Because I wrote on I read your bio, and you explained it there. So do people pronounce your name in America? Do they pronounce it as Milène?
Yes. Yeah. They never know how to pronounce it.
Oh, okay. But it's wonderful to talk to you, and I'm fascinated by your writing. You've got a very lovely blog post where you write about art, and yeah, okay. And where does this love for writing start?
It started at a very young age, maybe when I was around 8 years old. I just started writing little stories that were kind of fantastical, but they were just what was going through. It was just my imagination, and it seemed to get the attention of of my friends and family, so that seemed to work. But I was also
fantasy. But these fantasy stories. Did you have a great imagination?
I think, like any child, I think every child has a great imagination. I wouldn't consider myself any, different from other children. I think children usually are very imaginative and creative. So,
but wonderful that you wrote it down. So do you still have these stories?
I think my mom kept them in his notebook. Yes.
Oh, that is so sweet.
Yeah.
And then how did the writing develop from there?
I always was journaling since I was a kid. It was just a way for me to make sense of the world. I've always been very introverted. I think that's changed with age. I've been more balanced now between introversion, extroversion, somewhere in the middle. But when I was a kid, I was very, very much alone, and so it was just a way to make sense of my thoughts and my feelings. And it's something I always did, journaling, and I loved reading as well. Yeah, that's always been a constant. I've dabbled in a lot of things, but writing has always been my constant, I would say. There was a time I had a hiatus where I didn't write in my journal, and it was devastating.
Really?
Yeah. But
so
yeah.
When you say journal, so you just write every day something about what you did that day. So, and do you keep these journals?
I do keep them, and it's not necessarily a journal about what's happening in the day. It's more just trying to sort out my thoughts and make sense of the world. Kind of, it's not like a diary in a sense. It's more like me having a conversation with me.
Oh, okay. But that must be amazing. So if you look back over a few years and you see your thought processes, that must be very interesting to see that.
Yeah. I don't go back very much, but occasionally it's interesting. Interesting. I also started painting when I was around the same age. I did my first acrylic big painting when I was about 8. So that's also been always there. But that went on a long hiatus, and I dabbled in many other things. And now I'm going back to painting.
Amazing. But do you come from a family where, an artistic family where people painted and or artists in your family?
My mother was a graphic artist and she painted, but she mostly worked with Indian ink and did perspective drawings, very detailed perspective drawings
Oh, okay.
in Indian ink. She was a commercial artist, and my great grandfather was an engraver. He designed the money for Chile. um,
Really?
yes, so very detailed, similar to my mother.
Yeah.
Very detailed, fine lines with well engraving. It's very detailed. So, and on my dad's side, well, my dad is a scientist, so the other. But that's also very creative. He was a neurophysiologist and neuroscientist. He did research in Alzheimer's and muscular degenerative diseases like ALS and muscular dystrophy, things like that. So,
Amazing. Yeah,
yeah.
I think there's definitely a link between the arts and sciences. There must be. There's, this.
Well, you're trying to discover something that people haven't realized exists.
Yeah,
And it's the same with
exactly.
art. I mean, with art, you're creating something that hasn't existed before.
Mhm. Yeah,
Um, I mean, science is empirical, but it's different, obviously. But you are trying to bring into the world something that wasn't known before, or seen before, or understood before.
yeah.
So
But you write about art, so
yeah.
yeah. And how did these two come together? The love, you must love art to be able to look into these paintings like this and talk or write about it like that.
Well, it started gradually. So I was a journalist for many years, and I was interviewing people of many different prominent people of different backgrounds. And I was working as full-time staff for the Epoch Times then. And I was doing this series called A Tiny New York. This is New York. And one of these interviews was with artist Jacob Collins. He's a painter. He was the first artist I interviewed, and he's he's still one of my top favorites. And
Really?
after I interviewed him, that article did very well. It went viral, which was very unusual for an arts article for a newspaper. And the editor, the managing editor of the paper at the time, he was very much a numbers guy. And he said, "Oh, Milène, this article did so well. Why don't you just concentrate on artists?"
Oh, okay.
So I said, I was very hesitant at first and resistant to the idea, because I like to meet and talk to people of all different backgrounds. But I went with it because he was my boss, and then I loved it. And I didn't know many artists in the city, so I asked Jacob Collins to recommend other artists, and then I just started interviewing artists, and
Amazing.
I found them so fascinating. I got so deep in it that after some years, 4 years or 5 years, I don't remember exactly, I thought, well, I'm tired of writing about them. I want to become them. so
Yeah.
so I kind of went native, as anthropologists say. Yeah.
But amazing. Did you learn from them? Did you learn about different art forms then? Well, in art, did you learn that from them then, or did that make you inquisitive to say, look at other paintings as well?
Well, first of all, I've always been interested in the arts, and from a very young
Okay.
age, I always visited museums especially with my mom and friends. But the artists I was interviewing were all, I would say, traditional artists in the sense, more than like draftsmen, painters, sculptors, painting in a very representational way. So I had in my past, I had dabbled in different art forms, including filmmaking, dance. I was a gymnast when I was a kid. I did performance art. I did installation art. I did all in the background. So when I entered this world through Jacob Collins, I dove deep into the more traditional arts. But by then, my taste in art had already been evolving and changing all along. So one of the interesting, similar to the journaling and looking at my past journals, is that I've always collected cards from museums that I visit.
Really?
So, and I keep them pretty much in chronological order. So when I go through that box of cards, I can see how my taste in art has changed as well over the years. And it's changed a lot.
I can imagine, yeah, because the reason why I ask is if I speak to artists or if I speak to musicians and they talk about music that I didn't know, then it makes me so inquisitive to go and listen to the music, because sometimes they describe it or they talk about the music and you think, oh, this is amazing. I want to hear it. I want to understand more of this music. So, yeah, this is this also something that you got from these interviews?
Absolutely. And then I became friends with many of these artists, and we would go to museums and they would talk about these paintings in a way that I didn't quite understand. So then I wanted to understand more deeply. And I'm the kind of writer that I have to experience things to be able to write about them. So I thought, well, and one of the artists, Jordan Sokol, he is the director of the Lime Academy in Connecticut. He mentioned to me, and they also recommended to me many books. So they pretty much educated me as I went along interviewing them. He recommended this book of art critics at the turn of the century. And he said, art critics knew more deeply about the craft of art, of painting, drawing, and sculpting more than art critics do now, for sure. And I thought, I don't feel quite qualified. I need to learn more deeply to be able to write better about them. So then I started taking part-time drawing classes at Grand Central Atelier, and then I got hooked.
Really? But do you think but do you think this is the reason why previously the art critics knew so much, is because they themselves were involved in art? Do you think that makes a difference now for you?
It certainly makes a difference for me. I don't necessarily think it's a requirement for every arts writer, but I do think it is a plus. For example, the art historian Carmen Baumbach, she's the top expert on Da Vinci, Michelangelo. Now she's writing a book on Raphael. She, at a young age, she was copying Michelangelo drawings,
Really?
and that's how she made a discovery of a certain drawing that wasn't known. What was it attributed to? And she knew exactly which part of the Sistine Chapel that preliminary drawing was indicating, because she had made all those copies at a younger age, and I think in her 20s or teens. I'm not sure exactly when. So it does give you deeper insight, experiencing what you write about, I think. I studied anthropology as my undergraduate degree, and it's similar idea, I guess, that you live with the people you write about for a year or longer to be able to understand their culture. So that's kind of what happened to me with these painters and sculptors. I was, I basically went native, as I said earlier.
And of course, when they recommend and the more you talk to them, I can imagine that you get inspired. So what was it like when you did your first drawing?
Oh, it was quite a journey. I did a cast drawing of an ear. It was at Grand Central Atelier, and Grand Central Atelier is very special in their way of teaching. And I felt my brain was being rewired. I was making new my transmitters of the brain. It was like mental gymnastics, new pathways being created, and it was fast. I started to see things I hadn't been able to see before. I think there's a quote, I think it's Ruskin, I'm not sure. There's a quote, Juliet Aristides, who's written many books, and she's also an artist, and she's written many books about atelier trained art. I think she quoted him and said that you haven't really seen something until you've attempted to draw it.
I can totally believe that, because I think also I've spoken to a few sculptors who say that they notice on people, like the nose, the ear. So they watch things on people that to be able to sculpt it. And now that you're saying about the ear that you were drawing, and yeah, I can absolutely imagine that you have to then be so focused on what you're drawing.
Yes, and after I did that drawing of the cast of that ear, and the cast is a copy of, I think, Michelangelo's David's ear. So
Yeah.
you're
Okay.
basically connecting with Michelangelo as well, I guess, indirectly. I was, riding the subway or the train and looking at people's features, especially their ears, and how different they were. But also, especially on the subway, I would start looking at everybody's face and features and drawing them in my mind, and wanting to draw them as I was sitting there watching. And New York is a perfect place to watch a lot of different.
I can imagine, yeah.
It's a great laboratory.
Keeps you busy on the subway.
Yes, entertained at least. People watching.
So, and this was then the first time you drew, but you said you did art as a child as well.
Yes, and I did take a figure drawing class in my freshman year of undergraduate degree as an elective. I remember my advisor saying, "Well, why did you take this class?" And I thought, "Well, I just wanted to." And I think it took a long time for me to really give myself permission to go ahead and paint. I think it's always been an underlying passion that was kind of dormant, and I wasn't allowing it to come out until finally I became mature enough to allow myself to do that. I never had trouble identifying myself as a writer. That came easily to me. But painting, I still consider myself very much a student, and I'm still studying. But I think the learning process is endless. So I wouldn't consider myself a professional artist by any means. I still call myself for sure a Sunday painter because I'm still learning. But it is something I want to focus on more. But time is limited, and I'm also trying to write a book and writing articles, and I'm also editing. So it's slow, but it's there. It's something I want to give it more time. So.
But you said that the writing is a way, you felt the writing was a way to express yourself. And also I spoke to an artist who does illustrations, and she said that the illustrations for her is a way to express herself. So she can really, it's almost for her like a therapy. Do you find the painting, if you can compare now, so with how you feel about writing, do you think that is also a way of expressing yourself?
Oh, definitely. But I find with both, I think there's a transition that happens also with how we mature. So I think in the beginning, there's this instinct for artists to want to make their mark and say, "Hey, I am here. I exist. I want to show my mark in the world." It's a way of becoming immortal, so to speak. Like graffiti artists, why do people do graffiti? It's to make their mark. I am here. I exist. And I think that's a very human impulse, and that's definitely there with every artist. But I think as one matures and you're trying to sort yourself out, and it's also a healing journey, I would say. As you mature, I think gradually you become a little bit more selfless and want to give more to the world. And for me, I think art is very much about expressing beauty. So it's when I'm painting, or I'm not thinking so much about myself. I'm thinking I want to express the beauty that I experience or that I see, and I want to give that as a gift to others to inspire them. And beauty is sort of like a breadcrumb to the divine in my belief. So it's a way you turn from looking inward towards yourself and more wanting to give to others. And that's a very gradual process. And of course, there's always that element of still wanting to be seen as here I am, I exist, to wanting to be more giving to the others. But I think it's the same for both writing and painting or any other art form. With my journaling, it's very personal. It's more like trying to almost like self-therapy. I would say.
Yeah.
The painting is more more of a gift, I would say, of giving, more selfless.
Okay. But when you write about the art, how do you decide on which artist to write about or which art piece to write about? Is there something that, if you look at a piece, or if you go to a gallery, is there something that you think, oh, I want to write about it? Or do you have sort of a discipline where you just write about, what you think people will be interested in?
When I was a staff writer at Epoch Times, I had deadlines, so I had to constantly, very quickly find somebody or something to write about. So there wasn't much time to think about it. But I limited myself to traditional realist artists, so that to narrow it down, and because that was my interest, and also it aligned with the interest of the paper, and then to choose the artworks. Well, more recently, I'm independent, so now it depends more on, and I don't have deadlines anymore. So now I want to be very clear that whatever I do write about, it's something, and this, it's not much different from before, but it's even more so. It's something that really resonates with me. So recently I went to Amsterdam and to The Hague, and I went to see the Vermeer exhibition at the Rijksmuseum, and I love Vermeer. So I ended up not writing about it, but I ended up giving a talk at the Salma Gandhi Arts Club here in New York. It's a wonderful arts club. It's the third arts club in the U.S. It's very old. It's in the on Fifth Avenue near Washington Square Park, and it's a beautiful building, and it has a lot of history. So I gave a talk there about Vermeer, and then maybe I will write a blog post about it. But that was pretty much an artist that I love and I wanted to write about. And then the previous article I wrote was for Fine Art Connoisseur, and that I was assigned to write about realist art today, to give a cross section of that. And
okay.
February issue, Fine Art Connoisseur. So that was more like a marathon of trying to combine a lot of things all in 2,000 words or so. And for my blog, well, it's going slower than I wish it would. I was hoping to do at least a post once a month. Maybe I will be able to start doing that again. But basically, my motivation is want to expose this world that I've come across and show it to others, because not many people know about it. It's a small corner of the art world, I would say. And it's fascinating, and I love those artists, and because they're very, I find that they're very genuine. Their motivation of what they're doing is good.
Well, I love this idea that you have to write about that, because I think also it's this perception. We go to an art gallery, and it's the whole experience of an art gallery, and it's sort of, if you don't know a little bit, or you don't know a little bit about the artist or the painting, it's almost as if you cannot, well, I'm not saying not appreciate it, but I think also for younger people and for children, to understand the story behind the artist, or the story behind the painting or something, or make them aware to look out for something in the painting. And And just to give you an example, I went to a concert a while ago, and I actually read about, because I didn't know much of from the composer. I didn't know the music of the composer, and I just read a little bit of background about him. And suddenly, sitting in the concert, I noticed things that I read in this article that I then noticed that I wouldn't have noticed if I didn't read the article. So um, it's amazing that that you do this, because I think this will bring that attention for people to go and look at specific things, and maybe they see around that more. Maybe you make them focus on one thing, but because we all see things in a different way, but then just to get that initial spark to go and to watch, or to read about it then.
Yes, it is a support. It is a support to understand it more deeply. But yes, definitely. It sometimes I like to go to museums without reading anything and just experiencing it directly, and then I will read about those artworks after, or the other way around. And I like to do both. I do think there's a distinction between art that needs the writing to justify it, as opposed to art that just speaks for itself. And that's a clear distinction. It's almost like a boundary. But I think it always helps for whatever art that's out there to be written about, just to get a deeper understanding from a different perspective, and not just about the artist's life, but what was their thinking behind it. And other times I don't want to read about it, because I want to have a more direct experience and try to figure it out on my own.
But do you think, looking at paintings, because I've been sometimes, look at something and then I have an idea of one, and also when I watch a ballet, for example, my son took me to a ballet, and I had this idea of what I saw, and it was actually not what the choreographer had in mind, but I had a different story. So do you think we have to also be allowed to have our own story, even though, like you say, there is some facts about art and specific artists and specific artworks, but that we also have to have our own story or our own meaning to it?
Oh, for sure. Definitely. I would say definitely that you don't want everybody to have the same story about the artwork. Yeah, because we're all different. So, oh, sorry for the noise.
No.
There's a car honking. I think because we're all different and we want to connect with the artwork very personally. And I think that's also shows how successful that artwork is, that it was able to speak to so many different people in so many different ways. And it's also interesting to see what are the commonalities that people agree upon as well. So there's always some overlap, I think. Usually a little bit of overlap between your own personal experience and what other people think of that artwork. Or when I have conversations with artists about particular artworks, we'll agree on certain things. One thing that I find fun to do is that at the Selma Gandhi Art Club, they have painting competitions, drawing competitions, and I like to be a ghost judge.
I see. Okay.
And so the judges, will make the first cut of like maybe 10 paintings, and they all agree pretty much on that first cut, because there's something about those works that speak more strongly or connect with people more strongly. And that first cut of like maybe 10 paintings is easy, but then it gets harder to narrow it down to 3 and then to the final first prize winner, because then it's not so much a matter of technique or mastery, but something else. It's that special thing that we can't quite describe in words, and that is more about maybe personal taste or something else. So there was a recent show. It was the annual Open, and everybody I talked to agreed that the first prize winner was their favorite painting. even though all the paintings there were pretty much all very much at this similar technical level in terms of mastery. But it was easy to find the in that case, it was easy to find the first prize winner.
But isn't it, I mean, difficult to think of it this way, that art has to be, that there is this competition, you know, because but if you say now everybody agreed that it was the same one, this thing, that it must be something in that painting that spoke to people. So that is possible to get that.
I think so. And then the ultimate test is basically the test of time, right?
Oh, yeah.
You know, everybody, I think many artists agree Rembrandt is amazing, or Michael, you know, all the greats are amazing for a reason. And they've passed the test of time, you know, centuries. And so it's clear. With artists today, it's harder to tell.
Yeah.
But ultimately, you know, 100, 200, 300 years from now, well, we won't be alive, but, you know.
Yeah. What is still there is then, yeah, also the same idea. But do you think also for children in schools, do you think there's enough done in art?
Well, there's been...
Are they exposed to art enough?
I don't think art is given enough. I think art education in the past 50 years has been dumbed down, especially in the visual arts, unfortunately. And I hear this again and again from artists. You know, they say, you know, they were discouraged from wanting to learn in a more realistic, traditional, representational way. I hear it so many times in so many interviews and podcasts. It's across the board, and they couldn't get the education they wanted to in, say, in a university, so they ended up having to go to a private atelier. And these have popped up in the past 10, 20 years everywhere now. I mean, initially it was the Florence Academy of Art in Florence, which then expanded to Sweden and for a short stint in New Jersey, and then Grand Central Atelier in New York, which was before was Grand Central Academy, and before that it was Water Street Atelier. That's Jacob Collins' ateliers, that first artist that I interviewed.
Okay, yeah.
And then many other of these ateliers popped up in around the United States, also in London, in England, in I think there's one in South Africa, Australia, but mostly in Europe and North America, also in Mexico, to fill that gap, to fill that need, because there is a need of talented artists who want to learn. They see a master, you know, they see an old master painting at the Metropolitan Museum of Art at the Louvre, and they want to be able to paint like that. But there has been this notion floating around maybe some years ago or decades ago, as if that chapter was closed and that it's impossible to paint like an old master. Well, actually, it is possible, and it still is possible. And that craft hasn't been lost. I mean, it almost got lost because the education was dumbed down so much, and it was a tragedy. And I think now we're in a resurgence of trying to recover that. And that's not necessarily to displace whatever other art forms there. I think that all the art forms that are out there should exist, but there should be a room for all of them.
Yeah. But what I find very interesting is that during lockdown, and I did a series of interviews with artists in lockdown, and many started painting. Many started painting. Many musicians started painting.
Wow.
And I thought that was so interesting, that the moment that they couldn't do this, you know, or because I think in some sense, like musicians, you know, their story that they always told was that this suddenly everything has stopped, and they had so much more time, and they had so much more time to think and free time that they never had in their lives. And then, but what was interesting is that they then started doing another art form, so that this creative thing that they have inside to then start painting. So yeah, I think that maybe we all have that, and they just never had the opportunity to do it.
Mm, that's fascinating. Yeah.
Yeah.
I also, it's interesting with different art forms. In some ways, deep down, there's similarities. I also
Yeah.
interviewed some pianists, some musicians, and in terms of, when they describe the creative process.
Mm.
Well, you know this very well because you've also interviewed so many, definitely
Yeah.
many. Yeah, there's some similarities there, or what they struggle with, or how to get inspired.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. No, definitely. Also, many started baking and cooking and things like that, and that made me also realize that these are forms of art.
Yeah.
Because it's creating. It's this. I think it's this human need to create, and we don't all do it in the same way. But I think this is why baking and cooking and doing that and painting and doing all sorts of things. And then you hear of I spoke to a pilot the other day who started playing the piano in
Wow.
Latvia. Yeah. So
Well, that makes me want to learn how to fly.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, because this is why when I see these connections, these, like we spoke about science as well. I think uh, it should be really that art, all the different disciplines of art should stand alongside science and maths in the curriculum and languages. These subjects should all have equal time. Uh, taught, and children should be able to use then art also to express themselves, because what do schools do now? The art is really used just for 1 hour a week sometimes, and if you see what, like, I feel art and music and dance, they don't it's not just about the fact that you do the art form. I mean, there you already also notice that different connections happen in the brain. You think differently, you look at the world differently. So even if everybody doesn't become a musician or an artist, but it makes you see the world in a different way. Isn't that amazing? If you can think, we could have scientists with an art background who will look at the world in a different way, approach
Yes,
their work in a different way.
one informs the other. That's, I mean, and I think with art education, art is seen as somehow this lesser subject, but actually, if you learn the traditional way, it can take 10 years to learn the craft, even more so than for a doctor. It's one of my teachers at Grand Central Atelier, Ananda Featherston. She was a physicist before, and I think in quantum physics, and she's super smart. And she wanted to become a painter, so she went to Grand Central Atelier, and she confessed to me, learning to paint is harder than physics.
Yeah.
It is
I
hard.
can imagine,
That particular way that she's trying to learn the traditional way. She says this is harder than physics.
But if you look at art, if you look at all forms of art, everything has some, in some way, physics or chemistry or maths connected to it. Because if you just think of painting, if you just think of paint, and if you just think of the chemical processes already, and if you think of dance, it's got to do with physics as well. It's got to do with mathematics as well. So Yeah, it's these subjects are really all connected. So there should be that balance that they are all taught on the same level, I would say. I mean, not, you like we said, it's not that everybody's going to become an artist, but just the skills that you acquire by doing that art form, will help you with whatever you do later in life.
Absolutely. Or just learning the piano. I wish I would have learned the piano. I mean, it's you become ambidextrous. You're using both
Yeah.
hands. You're using both sides of your brain. It's an incredible skill to learn. Yeah, and of course, not everybody's going to be concert pianists,
Yeah.
but it's definitely worthwhile for sure. I agree 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But tell me now, what are still the wishes for you for the future, apart from wanting to learn to play the piano?
That'll be for another time.
Okay. Well, you started painting, so that's not impossible.
Stick to drawing and painting for now. So I'm continuing. It's summertime now, and the summer just started. So I will be going outdoors more to paint plein air outdoors. I'm still taking a class at grisaille. I'm painting a grisaille. Very technical. It's difficult. I am writing my book very well, still the preliminary parts of it, still gathering research, and that's going very slowly. But eventually it will get done. I'm also preparing I have a residency coming up. It will be in France and Chateau Arquevaux in the Champagne region. Wow. So it's a residency for artists and writers. So that was perfect for me. So my hope is that I will be doing landscape paintings during the day and writing at night. So I'm going to have my first draft done by then, so that then I will work on my draft and turn on my editor mode and edit my first draft while I'm there and paint during the day. So I'm looking forward to that. I will be going also to Toscana, to Italy, to write about a workshop that the New Masters Academy, it's this online art courses online called New Masters Academy. I highly recommend it. They have great teachers there. It's very flexible for people who want to learn online. And occasionally they'll have workshops in person. So they're going to have one in Ghana. I'm going there for a week, but I'm going to write about it for them, and also take the workshop. So that's
okay.
and so I'm looking forward to that. And I've also started to help edit a translation of a book that's been translated from Russian about Repin, the wonderful Russian artist. And it's a book about his life. So a friend of mine, she's Russian, and she's translating it, and I'm editing it. So
okay.
So that's a new project that just started. So I have a lot of things on my plate.
Amazing, yeah. But how wonderful that you have, so many things.
Thanks. Yeah, I just wish I would have more time. I feel like a late bloomer, and so I just want to live to be 200 so I can do all the things.
Okay.
And also learn the piano.
Yeah, I wanted to say the piano part I will remember. So I will remember when I see you play the piano. Okay. She did it.
Maybe when I'm 90.
But Milène, it was so lovely to talk to you, and you've got such a great energy and so enthusiastic about everything you do. It's amazing, really.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure being interviewed by you. Usually I'm on the other side. I'm usually
it's
a little scary to be on this end of it. You made it very enjoyable, and it's an honor to be interviewed by you. So
Oh, it was for me also lovely, and I hope to see you one day in Vienna. Maybe we meet in person.
I would love that. I would love
Yeah.
that. You gave me a reason to visit Vienna.
Yeah, that would be amazing. So let me know when you're here.
Yeah, I will.
Okay.
I will.
And have a lovely summer in Italy and France, and enjoy your champagne while painting.
Thank you, Petra. Thank you very much.
Okay. Have a
Okay.
lovely afternoon. Bye.
Bye.